Welcome back. So much happening in the United States, so much violence happening in the United States lately. The pipe bombs that were sent to officials of governments past mostly, and also individuals who criticized Donald Trump. Then the horrific attack on the weekend at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, claiming 11 lives. A lot of this violence is, of course, been fed by the political climate. People who are angry, who support the views of the administration, or who are angry because of issues that came up during the campaign back in 2016 that are still with us in terms of race and race baiting, all sorts of things that are happening. And in the context of all this, there was another attack. It never happened. It was thwarted, actually. It was a bomb plot that would have actually taken place the day after the 2016 election in the U.S. Three men were convicted of conspiracy to make a massive attack, actually. Curtis Allen, Patrick Stein, and Gavin Wright. They were convicted by a federal jury in the United States in April of plotting to bomb the mosques and homes of Somali immigrants in Kansas. They're leaders of a militia out there. And they didn't actually do the thing because one of their co-conspirators called in the plot, foiled it, and they were arrested. And they may have, their lawyers say they would have actually probably called it off because Donald Trump won the election. The reason they were plotting to do this, they say, is because they were inspired by Donald Trump. In fact, that's their defense as they are facing sentencing. The court says, the defense lawyers have said in filings, the court has to acknowledge Trump's rough and tumble verbal pummeling in the 2016 election campaign that heightened the rhetorical stakes for people of all political persuasions, and that Trump appealed to lost and ignored white working class men like their clients who were an early and avid supporter of the president. Basically, they are blaming Donald Trump for these guys threatening or plotting to blow up mosques and homes of Somali immigrants. That's a very novel defense, shall I say. And I was just wondering, will this stand up in court in the current climate? Is it something a court would buy? Because it seems a lot of people are being inspired, but does that let them off the hook? Joining us now to talk about it, our criminal law expert here at 640 Toronto, Joe Neuberger. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Tasha. How are you?
Hi. Well, okay, I got to ask you, as a criminal lawyer, have you ever seen a defense like this?
Well, it's some arguments on sentencing, so they're guilty. So they're just trying to get some mitigation in sentence by suggesting that they were, inspired by the rhetoric of the president. But it doesn't work because, and I think it's just maybe fashionable right now to do this in the U.S. in a number of cases, given the incredibly volatile and damaging rhetoric which is going on. But any individual who commits an act of terror or any type of criminal act could be inspired by any number of areas. It could be the rhetoric from politicians. It could be anything you read on social media from a particular group, like, unfortunately, an Islamic site. So it is not something that a court, in my opinion, should ever take into consideration. It may be in passing, a judge would say that, unfortunately, we live in times where there's this incredible rhetoric coming from important people in our country, but nonetheless, it does not lessen the culpability that these individuals have, nor should it lessen their sentence in any way, in my opinion.
See, I wonder about that simply because we've seen on the sort of flip side here in Toronto, judges taking circumstances into account in sentencing. There was a man who was recently, I can't remember his crime, what he was convicted of. I think it was possession of a handgun, illegal handgun. And the court took into account, the judge did there, not just his particular circumstances. He was a black man from an economically unfavorable childhood. He had had difficulties in his life, not the specific circumstances, what the courts usually do, but the general, saying, there's a lot of racism out there. The reason he ran from police was a natural reaction because black men will fear the police. And so his sentence was actually less. I think he was sentenced to house arrest. So there is that perception of like social condition affecting sentencing. Do you think that that maybe is a trend that we are seeing and that could expand to cases like this?
No, these are two different instances. So that case didn't actually result in a house arrest, but it was a significantly less sentence where the judge had said, I'm taking a chance on you. And what the judge did was that they acknowledged a number of very sound academic pieces about systemic racism in Canada over decades, which has led to circumstances that are relevant to the individual that was being sentenced, much like we recognized in the Gladue principles, the systemic issues that have marginalized Indigenous Canadians. So that is in the same ilk, and it is addressing issues of systemic poverty, discrimination, and other aspects which lead somebody to a life possibly of violence. And in some cases now that's recognized, and we've done this now for some time, some considerable time with respect to Indigenous individuals. But that's different than trying to blame somebody who posts something up on Twitter or on social media, or a politician who's saying stuff about an identifiable group. That doesn't change how you grew up. Mm-hmm. That's not somebody who's lived in, systemic poverty. So what's more relevant to these individuals, if one of these individuals was, an orphan and then was adopted in a family where they were white supremacists and they were indoctrinated that way, and now they see there are other ways and they're really sorry about it, that might be a mitigating circumstance because they were brought into a family and they were indoctrinated in a certain way and they were exposed to certain things that had an impact at a young age. And so that would be, from a sociological, psychological standpoint, something that you could take into consideration. This is completely different. This is scapegoating. You're trying to blame a politician or some other source of, ridiculous rhetoric as to why you were doing something or planning something that was incredibly harmful. I see them as two very distinct issues, but there is no doubt that we're living in different times now where the rhetoric is really extreme, and we're not seeing calming signs coming from persons in power who should be giving a calming, more inclusive type of message.
All right. Thank you so much for breaking this down for us, Joseph Neuberger, 640 Toronto's criminal law expert. Have a good afternoon and a happy Halloween to you, Joe.
Thank you. You too. Take care.